No, it's going to be great. Guys, you ready for our first act? Yeah! Yes! Alright, well put your hand...
I'm like the funny smart guy, like a funny cute smart guy.
Right, mate, you're not funny.
Off, I am funny and you're not funny.
Keep cheering on the stage while I'm back
That is hilarious.
Like any decent influencer, I've always known that to make it in this game, you've got to be where the money is. And that's why after many months of sulking, my boss finally gave in and let me move to London. This was under the strict condition that my producer Big Dill join me, so that he can cut my food, lift heavy objects, and primarily keep me out of trouble.
It's London!
But now I'm just a pretty little fish in a big pond, and the pressure's on to make a splash. But how? I needed a quick and dirty way of getting myself on the London scene and letting people know that Maxi Tobin's in town and he's here to stay. So we've been having a few lunchtime pints in there and they just said that they do like a comedy evening, so I'm thinking that might be a good way to sort of get my face out there. And obviously I am quite funny, so I think I should give it a crack. But I am a funny guy is the thing. Like, obviously I know you write some of the jokes, but like, I am funny. Like a funny, cute, smart guy. Because that's sort of my shtick, isn't it? I could talk about like the tube, and no one smiles on the tube. Honestly, I think the main thing is that it doesn't really matter what jokes I'm going to make, because like people like seeing my face and hearing my voice. So I think as long as I'm like about it, then like it'll be good. And with that, it was settled. I was to become a shining light on the London stand-up circuit, and in doing so, contribute to a rich cultural tradition steeped in history. From Plato's Republic to Darwin's Field Notes to Freud's obsession with dirty jokes, most seem to agree that there's something to be said for having a good giggle. And this is unsurprising, given that laughter has played a big part in our evolutionary history. We know this thanks to the disturbed experiments of Gilles Deschênes, who enjoyed sticking electrodes to his elderly patients' faces like the sick he was. By varying voltage, he found that humans have two very distinct ways of smiling: a voluntary response to express encouragement or interest, and an involuntary, hysterical response to things we find genuinely funny. The latter evolved around 3 million years ago, long before speech, and would have been used as a signal of playfulness and enjoyment. The former, however, is only a few 100,000 years old, and developed as a means of mimicking the other, purer form of amusement. This might sound odd, but being able to fake laugh is a pretty useful tool in negotiating the aggressive social context we inhabit.
Are you gonna miss your mom?
No.
No?
In any case, all this proves that far from a simple response to humour, laughter is an essential social tool that lies at the core of what it means to be human. Which is good news for professional funny men like me, who can remain safe in the knowledge that we provide a public service, much like doctors, scientists and humanitarian workers. With such a dense history, the prospect of conquering the world of comedy seems suddenly daunting. So I decided to call in an expert to help me craft my set and take the London stand-up scene by storm. So Bruno, what I want to know is like what makes things funny?
Well, lots of different things, and we don't know for sure, but we know that we certainly enjoy seeing rules being broken and norms being breached, you know, and especially we laugh when these things are benign, when we realise that something is not as it should be, but it's all going to be okay, in a bizarre way. You know, for instance, you walk into a train station, see someone at the ticket machine, instead of putting in their card, they're trying to put a sausage in. You know, it won't work, but no one's hurt.
So what about if it's not benign? What about if someone falls on a banana peel and like, you know, smacks their
properly
head,
clocks
like,
their head,
lands on like a baby? Like,
well,
is it still...
That's the thing, and that's why it's often been said that, you know, comedy is tragedy plus time. And when time has proved that everything is okay, we often find that things are funny.
In terms of the balance, just so I can understand it, let's say someone being struck by lightning in the late 1800s after explicitly saying that they won't be struck by lightning.
funny.
That is funny.
Very much funny, especially for us now, looking
Yeah.
back on it as a sort of story.
What about like the beheading of Anne Boleyn, but like to a Victorian?
Not funny
That's not funny.
in the slightest. I'm sure people will find funny things about that as history goes on, but it's not really funny.
What about like the massacre of Christians in the Roman Empire leading up to Marcus Aurelius' reign?
Without a doubt, that's one of the funniest images I could possibly think of. You know, I'm in stitches.
That's really funny.
Yeah, extremely funny. Yeah.
After a quick introduction, Bruno wanted to see me in action and run through some of the key rules of stand-up.
So if we start with a one-liner, you know, a nice little bite-size bit of comedy. You know, if I give you an example, my mate, who's a fisherman, recently gave me a new torch, and I was trying to find where to put the batteries in, and I was looking around, and eventually I realised it must be a wind-up. You know, because it's a wind-up torch.
Oh, okay. My mum bought me a really horrible duvet cover the other day, and I thought that must be taking the piss.
It's a nice start. So if things aren't going very well, you know, in a comedy performance, you can always save it with a bit of slapstick. Everyone always loves slapstick. Back in the day, you'd have someone walking along, steps on a rake, and it springs up and hits them in the nose. Obviously, these days, we don't tend to have so many rakes sitting about, but we can apply the same principles to things that we do have around us every day.
So I could drop my phone maybe? Like.
Oh yes, that's a great idea. Yeah, exactly. Whoa. Excellent. We're making leaps and bounds. So another really good thing that helps your audience identify with you, a bit of a communal laughter feeling, is a bit of observation. So is there anything funny that's happened to you recently?
You know how when you're walking back to your home in London and there are the kids on your street, they're spitting on you and they're throwing stuff at you.
It's something we can all relate to. Kids on my street, it's exactly the same. They smashed my windows, they killed my pet cat. It's something that we can all really enjoy laughing about together.
Alright, it's really good.
Yeah.
It's bad though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It draws attention to the performance itself. It makes a joke of you making the joke. It's this story we've just spoken about of being bullied by the kids. You could turn that on the audience. If they're not laughing at you, if they don't find that funny, they're the ones bullying you.
And I could take my clothes off.
Yeah, and that would make a whole new dimension of surrealism available to you, and that would be funny.
Okay.
To take your clothes off while you're doing this, unpacking the whole joke.
With the crash course over, all that was left to do was pen a side-splitting set. As priceless as Bruno's guidance had been, I knew if I was going to make a real impression, I'd have to dive deeper than the average comic. This would mean getting inside my audience's head and understanding the psychological underpinnings of humour. As much as comedy might seem like a good laugh, recent studies would suggest that it's primarily an adaptive response to the darker sides of human experience. Through analysing brain activity during laughter, scientists posit that humour acts as a form of psychological processing, a coping mechanism that helps people deal with the complex or contradictory messages we receive on a daily basis. As such, laughter is often seen in response to confusing and tragic events that on the surface shouldn't be funny at all. This goes some way to explaining Bruno's observation that tragedy plus time equals comedy. In fact, a group of American researchers actually put this equation to the test, looking to quantify the relationship between a violent event and its perceived comic value. What they found was that violations of norms do indeed form an intrinsic part of humour, but that these violations cannot stray too far or occur too soon, else they are considered disgusting or upsetting. However, while distance was seen to increase the comedic value of a major tragedy, mild violations, such as stubbing one's toe, were observed to be less funny over time. This suggests that for comedy, there's a real sweet spot, a perfect balance between the severity of the tragedy addressed and the time from which it took place. As for me, I was very doubtful I'd find anything resembling a sweet spot in my set. My slot drew ever closer, and with a half-baked routine hastily scribbled and not nearly enough alcohol in my system, I was beginning to have doubts about the entire ordeal.
I know, I just feel like I'm quite, like, there's quite a lot of people in there that are probably quite good at it. I know I'm a funny guy and I know
Maybe
I'm very
the
smart and
case,
funny.
yeah.
But the other thing is that what if the audience aren't smart and funny, then they might not get the smart funny jokes.
Well, then you win, don't you?
But if I die on stage, at least I guess I'll know, you're saying I'll know I'm funnier and I am smarter.
And at least there will be some comedic value in you dying on stage. Even if it all falls apart, it's not the worst thing that could happen. Because after time, that itself will be funny. And that's the important thing.
Immediately.
Not immediately.
It's not like stubbing your toe.
What is it? The funny face. That's it. Come on. They're waiting for you. Come on, man.
With a semi-renewed sense of confidence, it was almost time to shine. The room was tense and the audience seemed a little cagey. Thankfully, our compare James was on hand to warm them up for a night of frivolity and mirth.
Guys, we're gonna have to warm up a little bit here. Do you agree?
I don't think she agrees.
Me either.
As the first acts performed their routines, the reality of my situation began to settle in, and armed only with a few comedic tricks up my sleeve, it was my turn to take the
Let me
stage.
keep cheering on the stage while I'm next to them!
Whatever you do, don't die on stage.
Right, I'm just putting a banana peel down next to me. I just want you to all know that. Obviously it's not going to play a part in the routine because that would be very reductive and slapstick. But the banana peel is going to go down here, just so you all know.
I'd gotten off to a slightly rocky start, and the audience seemed tense. All I could do now was remember my training and have faith in the process.
So if we start with a one-liner, nice little bite-sized bit of comedy.
I'm going to start with some one-liners. So one interesting thing is that apparently, like, time and tragedy equals comedy, right? So I prepared some jokes about things that happened a very long time ago. So how do you make a Victorian gentleman cry? Remind him of the Crimean War, which he may have lost a leg or a son in.
Is there anything funny that's happened to you recently?
I had to bury my dad this week, he passed away. But he died in quite an unconventional way. Basically what happened was we had like a really serious like weed problem. So what he did was he like absolutely went to town on this set of shears. But then what happened was, whilst he was gardening the next day, he fell like throat first onto them. Anyway, what's problematic about this is that when you tell people your dad died in like a horrific gardening accident, you can tell that even though they're sympathetic, they do sort of like want to laugh. And I just like don't see why people should laugh just because he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed.
It draws attention to the performance itself. It makes a joke of you making the joke.
On my street there were these like sort of hideously violent kids. They'd sort of spit at me and like throw things. And the sad thing about it is that like obviously, you know, like it was bad enough when I was a child and I was bullied. You're not gonna like how this ends. You're not gonna understand it. It was really bad because obviously like, you know, like they were kids. But the thing is that was bad obviously. But the crazy thing is that this is worse. Because what's happening now is I'm at a fucking comedy night in Shoreditch, and it's like, you know, and you're all laughing at how much I was bullied, and like, you know, can't you see how humiliated I already am? And yeah, like, I'm here, and it's like, and this is comedy, and this is what it is. And it's like, all these kids were doing really horrible things, but like this is the worst, and this, what you're watching now, is like probably the least funny thing in the world.
You can always save it with a bit of slapstick. Everyone always loves slapstick.
Those little jokes never coming back. Bye.
Despite my fears, the set seemed to go down pretty well. Though my jokes were ill-conceived, bizarre, and at times offensive, my confidence and cuteness had seen me comprehensively win over a fickle crowd. As it turned out, people do just intrinsically enjoy my presence, whether that be presenting a hard-hitting documentary series or lying nude on a comedy stage. London's a big place, and for a boy as smart, cute and funny as me, the dense, smog-filled sky is very much the limit.
Well, mate, it's been a pleasure. I can't thank you enough, man.
Oh, it's great to watch you. Real talent of the future.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You really mean that?
All the best. I mean that. Anyway,
wonderful.
I've got to run. See you
Alright,
soon.
mate. Man's got to run. Man's got to run. He's really running. He's really running.